Welcome back. Obviously, for those who've been following the stop and frisk, basically the practice on trial, and the trial now in the hands of the judge. We've been waiting for her decision, which is several weeks, we think, away. But there is news in the interim to report here. Apparently, the pending lawsuit may lead to a federal monitor for the NYPD. I want to bring Dominic in to tell us what that means here, and also what that also means for maybe what this final program's going to look like when it's said and done.
Well, Richard, at the 11th hour, right before the deadline to submit motions Wednesday, the Office of U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder filed a brief seeking a federal NYPD monitor if, a big if, the court finds the stop and frisk policy unconstitutional. Holder's office dropped its bomb shortly before midnight Wednesday, making good on an earlier vow to get involved in the controversial issue. Manhattan federal judge Shira Scheindlin, who is deciding the class action suit, would appoint such a monitor. As you might expect, New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg and Police Commissioner Ray Kelly are adamantly against a federal monitor for the NYPD. City lawyers have argued the court does not have the authority to appoint such a monitor. They have said a monitor would be unnecessary because the NYPD is already overseen by entities such as its own Internal Affairs Bureau, the Civilian Complaint Review Board, state and federal prosecutors, and the New York City Council. But the feds disagree, Richard, and cite federal monitors who have been successful in other cities. If the city didn't already have enough to contend with, there is also a pending city council bill that could separately create independent oversight of the police department. The 2-month trial ended May 20th, and the judge has yet to rule. A decision, Richard, could come in the next few weeks.
So Dominic, give me an idea. What would a monitor look like in terms of if they say, all right, and as everybody knows, overwhelmingly the people stopped, people of color, and overwhelmingly, almost 90-something%, they're almost all, more than 90%, they said, okay, go about your day. The judge basically put the practice on trial. She's got 2 suits going on. 17. If the feds, like they have said, if you find this thing unconstitutional, appoint a monitor. Tell everybody what a monitor looks like, what a monitor can or can't do.
Well, good question, because I was thinking about that today. In cities like New Orleans, for example, in Philadelphia, they've had monitors, and the fire department for New York City has a federal monitor. It basically amounts to a partner, an independent partner who's watching. Now, they can influence policy. They obviously don't control the police department. But if they see alarming figures, trends that are pointing one way or another, more Latino men are being stopped than X amount, they can point that out. And the commissioner is going to have to listen. This would basically, Richard, ease the burden on a judge, a federal judge, in this case Judge Scheindlin, who has had to watch the NYPD, and this takes away from other things that she could be doing. It's an independent voice. It's one that cities are always adamant against bringing in.
So what's the city council thinking of doing?
Well,
here?
Right now the city council, I believe, is playing a back focus role, waiting to see what Judge Scheindlin's going to do and waiting to see on whether or not a federal monitor is appointed. They would like to see, and we don't know, the question is the council, if they approve this, Bloomberg vetoes it, do they have enough votes to override it? Quinn, the Speaker of the Council, I mean, looking at the judge there, all the pressure's on her as we are awaiting her ruling. And, we thought that it might come in the next couple, initially the first couple of weeks, but it could take anywhere between 2 and 3 months.
And this all is in the backdrop of an election this November. We're going to have a new mayor, unless Bloomberg rewrites rules again. But we're going to have a new mayor, and whoever that mayor is, at least of all the Democratic candidates, they've all said to varying degrees, stop and frisk the way it is now won't be that way if they're elected. They'll have their own police commissioner. So the question becomes, with whatever the judge rules, it's going to be different no matter what, assuming a Democrat wins in November.
But Richard, here's another twist. Some, like Councilman Peter Vallone Jr., have said that the federal monitor is a bad idea because if you're the mayor and you plan on keeping Ray Kelly, like Christine Quinn has indicated, basically, Kelly will not want to be the police commissioner if there's a federal monitor in place. So the city may end up losing its outstanding police commissioner as a result of this.
What can you say?
A lot of criticism on the Holder decision, both on the substance of it, whether you want to have a monitor from the NYPD or not, but also the timing of it. A lot of people think it's influencing or might be an attempt to influence Judge Scheinlin's ruling in the case, where she can now say, well, if I find in this way, I know that this is one of the remedies that's available to me, as opposed to sort of leaving that up in the air. And there are a lot of complaints today that it might be trying to influence her in a decision in that direction.
But it's also an indication from the White House and from the feds. They don't think stop and frisk. They're not comfortable with it either. So.
Now, officially, they have not. I'm glad you brought that up. Officially, the feds have not taken a position on whether or not stop and frisk is constitutional. But as you just said, reading between the line, for them to get involved at the 11th hour, they're saying that they do not believe in stop and frisk. This is my interpretation, and that they have a problem with it.
You know, I was meant to ask you, Don. We always talk about the police leadership that was on trial. That testified. How about the PBA? Because they're the guys on the front lines. They're the ones who have to answer whether it was a good or a bad stop. Some have recorded here when they're getting the commanders to tell them to make the quotas or whatever. Would the PBA be upset if this thing went away or not?
If what went away?
If stop and frisk went away, the way it's done now.
Well, I would imagine that Pat Lynch, the president of the PBA, would be very upset because the police have argued continuously throughout the years that this is an effective tool in fighting law enforcement, that it's an effective way of them getting the job done.
But it also puts a target on them in that every time
and a quota.
Right,
and
the
a quota.
So they're getting
the big
pressure from both sides.
Right.
From leadership, you know, from Police Plaza, and then arguably from the other side, from the community, that says they're targeting certain people instead of certain others.
And Richard, you know, and Jeannie and Andrew, I thought, in covering the NYPD for 25 years, I thought I knew it all until I sat in that federal courtroom with Judge Scheinlin. If you're a police officer, every month, based on what the testimony said, you've got to go out there and, for example, get 10 arrests.
Got to make your numbers.
20 tickets and 20 stop and frisk. That's a tall order.
Yeah.
You know, you got to find this no matter what every month. That's the minimum level to make you an effective, good police officer.
And if you want promotions, got to make your numbers.
Do a lot more, right?
All right, now we come back. Andrew's favorite guy, Pedro Espada, finally sentenced to 5 years behind bars. I say finally because that's part of the story. One of the most crooked politicians we've seen in New York in some time. That's saying something. Finally gets what's coming to him. We'll explain after this.